Gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Carter, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of you for being here. This is very interesting. I was a mayor in another life, and I can tell you these are the type of things that I think the government does well and that we utilized. In fact, in the state of Georgia, we've been very successful in a number of projects, particularly in the Atlanta area. If you look at Atlantic Station, that to me has to be one of the best examples anywhere in the nation. I mean, that is multi-use and such a vibrant place now, kind of a centerpiece, if you will, of the whole area. And not only at Atlantic Station, but Ponce City Market. That's another example of a great project. My son actually works in that building, and so I see it firsthand quite often. And again, that's the kind of thing that builds up my confidence or makes me feel good that we are doing some things good, and we do from time to time. I want to ask you, because I want to understand what are the challenges, if you will, that you face when you're working with third-party developers and when you're working with third-party developers on a prospective purchase or something. What's the biggest challenge that you face with that? Because this has to be a partnership. Mr. Anderson?
Probably time. Developers move at a different, rate of speed as to the government does, and that's just the way life works. To respond to it, we have to have the staff in place, knowledgeable, and staff that are able to respond and do, at least in my program, handle the cleanup that is associated with those sites, or to provide that advice to the local government and the developer itself.
Yeah, we know that the wheels of the federal government move slow, so that's...
They do, but surprisingly in this program, if you compare it to other programs, because most of the developers or the cities that are enrolling properties, they've got an end goal in mind to finish this development. They have money on the line. They're ready to move.
Right. Anybody else? Yes, sir, Mayor Bolwich?
Congressman, thank you. The biggest problem is, first of all, the developer needs to make money, and therefore, taking that aside, how does he do that, or how do they do that? And when they're looking at the revenue item, they want to know if there's a grounds to cover the assessment costs, if there's a grounds to cover the cleanup costs, if there's a grounds for tax abatement from the local municipality and or whatever state grants could be available. So you start off with whatever the developer's number is, and how do you get to that developer's number, and then they're looking for all types of other areas. And one of the ways we can help is through assessment and cleanup with the help of the federal government.
You brought that up, and I appreciate it very much, because that segues exactly into my next question, and that is, you mentioned yourself about some of the projects are easier than others, and we understand that. The projects in urban areas are very different from projects in rural areas, and I have some urban area, but mostly rural area in my district. I've got one example of a high-risk, high-reward project, if you will. It's a paper mill that's in pristine property. I mean, it's just located on deep water, but it's going to take a lot of cleanup, and we're just struggling. It's in St. Mary's, Georgia, and we're really struggling with getting someone interested in taking on that high risk. Any experiences with that? Any suggestions?
What we did, Congressman, is on this mill, I worked for a developer before I became mayor. In the 16 years I was out of office, I worked for 2 different developers. My economic development director and I knew that we would never get anyone interested in this building in the private sector, in this 18 acres, 16 buildings of blight and environmental contamination. So what we did was we put together a package to go out and get all the grants that we could, including Brownfield grants, to clean the property up. Then we offered it to the third party by doing an RFP. Now we're giving them a piece of property that the liability is gone. The lead's gone, the soil remediation is done, everything is done, and right on down to structural analysis of the buildings. I believe that's government's role. How do we get it to a point where a private sector will, they had baseball as well, I'll use a football analogy, we handed it off. We handed it off to the next person, the private sector, to invest $100 million, whereas we spend probably about $7 or $8 million in grant money to clean the entire site, put in the infrastructure, because there was no infrastructure left. And in many of these brownfields, the infrastructure is a complete reinvestment.
Right.
That alone was a couple $1 million.
Wow. Congressman, can I say real quickly in the few seconds that are left that I worked with the developer Jim Jacoby on a number of aspects down with the Atlantic Station. I remember when it was just a huge slag field of abandoned material. And one of the things that was so clear to me, this is a very innovative gentleman, as you know. He's trying to solve one problem, and it immediately moves to the next section, next section, which is why I go back to we really need to be flexible on this so that one part, in fact, is moving and you're just doing the assessment over on this part. And he is a tremendous example
Absolutely.
of what can be done.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's time expired. Chair now recognizes